The night Seoul's most dangerous man walked into Noir, the underground restaurant where shadows swallowed secrets whole. No one expected him to stop breathing over a waitress. But Kang Min-ho, boss of the Kang Syndicate, a man who'd buried enemies without blinking, froze the moment Amanda turned around. Coffee-brown skin glowing beneath golden light, curves that defied the sterile world he lived in, eyes carrying a storm he recognized because he'd caused so many. She didn't bow, she didn't flinch. She simply looked at him like he was ordinary, and something ancient and ruined cracked open inside his chest. Welcome to Afro-Korean romance, where love has no borders. If you believe in love, please like, share, and subscribe for more Afro-Korean romance stories. The reservation had been made under a false name because Kang Min-ho never dined anywhere publicly. He existed in boardrooms, back offices, and underground parlors where loyalty was the only currency. Noir was different. A sophisticated restaurant his lieutenant, Park Sung, had chosen specifically because its private dining section was sealed behind soundproof walls. Min-ho arrived at exactly 9 o'clock, flanked by two men in black suits. The maitre d' paled and scrambled, whispers followed like smoke. And then Amanda appeared around the corner with a tray of wine glasses balanced on one elegant arm, her natural hair pinned up with a single gold clip, her uniform somehow looking like it had been designed for her body alone. She was humming something under her breath, a soft, absent-minded melody, and she didn't see him until she was 3 steps away. She looked up. She didn't gasp. She tilted her head slightly like he was a puzzle she didn't particularly feel like solving tonight and said, "Your table is ready, sir, right this way." Min-ho hadn't moved. Park Sung leaned close. "Boss." "I heard her," Min-ho said quietly, and followed Amanda through the restaurant like a man walking toward something he couldn't name. She seated them without ceremony, distributed the menus with practiced efficiency, and recited the evening specials in a voice that was low, rich, and utterly unbothered by the way Min-ho was watching her. Because he was watching. He hadn't opened the menu once. His dark eyes tracked every movement she made, the way her wrist turned when she set down the wine list, the soft exhale she released when a table nearby flagged her down. The brief flash of irritation she quickly smoothed from her expression. When she returned to take their order, Min-ho looked directly at her. "What do you recommend?" he asked. Amanda paused. Most men who looked like him, tailored like a knife, cold like marble, never asked waitstaff for opinions. They demanded. "The braised short rib," she said evenly. "Chef reduces the sauce for 6 hours. It's the only thing on this menu worth the price." Something moved behind his eyes. "Then bring that, and whatever wine pairs with it, your choice." She wrote it down without looking up. "Anything else?" "Your name." The pen stopped. Amanda looked at him fully then, and Min-ho felt the collision of it, that gaze, direct and unafraid, like a hand pressed flat against a wound he hadn't known was open. "Amanda," she said, nothing more. She walked away. Min-ho watched until she disappeared into the kitchen, then turned back to the table where Park Sung was carefully studying the ceiling. "Not a word," Min-ho said. "I said nothing," Park Sung replied, and wisely kept it that way. Amanda counted her tips in the break room, her feet aching, her mind running through tomorrow's scheduled double shift, then her evening class at the community college she'd been attending for 2 years trying to finish her degree. She worked at Noir because it paid well enough to keep the lights on and her younger sister in school. There was no room in Amanda's life for complications. The door to the break room opened. She looked up expecting her manager, Cho-hee. It was one of the suited men from table 12. He held an envelope. "Mr. Kang would like to express his appreciation for the service this evening." He set the envelope on the table and left before she could speak. Amanda stared at it, then she opened it. Inside was more money than she made in a full week of double shifts, and a single black card with a number embossed in gold. She sat there for a long moment. Then she put the cash in her purse. She was not proud enough to refuse money she needed, and dropped the card in the bin. Min-ho sat at the head of the long conference table in the Kang Group's upper floor offices, presiding over what appeared to be a legitimate shipping conglomerate meeting. In reality, the shipping routes were the veins through which the syndicate's influence flowed across 3 countries. His younger brother, Kang Dae-ho, sat to his left. Dae-ho was beautiful in the way that spoiled things are beautiful, perfectly maintained, impeccably dressed, and quietly rotten at the core. He had their father's face and none of their father's discipline. "The Busan crew is asking for a larger cut," Dae-ho said, scrolling through his phone while the accountant spoke. I told them we'd consider it. You don't make promises on behalf of this organization, Min-ho said without looking up from the report in front of him. Dae-ho's jaw tightened. I was managing the relationship. You were freelancing? Min-ho's voice didn't rise. It never did. That was what made it terrifying, the absolute quiet of it. Don't do it again. The meeting continued. Dae-ho said nothing more, but his eyes held something Min-ho recognized and filed away, resentment, old as childhood, sharpening into something new. Min-ho returned to Noir. He told himself it was because the food was acceptable. He told himself it was proximity. The restaurant was near a contact he needed to see. He told himself many things in the elevator ride down to the private level, and none of them were true. Amanda saw him before he saw her this time. She was at the service station and her shoulders shifted just slightly before she smoothed her expression and walked over. Mr. Kang, she said, same table. You remember my name. You're hard to forget, she said, and the words were neutral, careful, but something beneath them shimmered, and Min-ho caught it the way a man catches a falling glass on pure instinct. Same table, he agreed. He came alone this time. No Park Sung. No bodyguards at the table, though they stood at the room's perimeter where they always did, invisible unless you knew to look. Amanda brought the braised short rib without being asked. He noticed. You assumed, he said when she set it down. You had the same thing 3 nights ago and cleaned the plate, she replied. It seemed reasonable. I usually don't appreciate assumptions. I usually don't care what powerful men appreciate, she straightened. Enjoy your meal. He caught her wrist, barely the lightest pressure, and she went absolutely still. Sit with me, he said. I'm working. I'll compensate the restaurant for your time. Amanda looked down at his hand on her wrist. He released it immediately, like he hadn't realized he'd reached out at all. For a moment, something flickered across his face, almost discomfort, almost surprise at himself. I don't sit with customers, she said quietly. I know, he looked up at her. I'm asking anyway. She studied him for 4 full seconds. Then she pulled out the chair across from him and sat, not because he was powerful, not because of the money, but because his eyes, up close, looked like a man who hadn't slept properly in years and had forgotten that was unusual. She recognized that particular exhaustion. She lived inside it. They talked for 40 minutes. He asked about the wine she'd selected, a South African Syrah, and she explained her reasoning with the confidence of someone who'd educated herself from books and tasting notes and sheer determination. He listened. Really listened, not the performative attention of men who were waiting for their turn to speak, but the focused, intent quiet of someone taking notes. He told her almost nothing about himself. She didn't ask. When Cho-hee appeared at the dining room entrance and made frantic eyes at Amanda, Amanda rose without embarrassment. Thank you for the conversation, she said simply. Amanda, his voice stopped her. The card I sent. I threw it away. A pause, why? She considered lying, decided against it, because I can't afford to be curious about someone like you. She walked away before she could see his expression, but if she had looked back, she would have seen something startling on the face of Seoul's most feared man. He was smiling, his brother's interest. The following week, Noir hosted a private event, a syndicate dinner Min-ho didn't attend, delegated instead to Dae-ho and 3 senior members. It was a courtesy dinner. Relationship maintenance, the kind of function Min-ho found tedious. He didn't know Dae-ho would be there until Park Sung mentioned it offhandedly while Min-ho reviewed security footage from the restaurant's surrounding block, footage he'd quietly obtained for reasons he wasn't examining too closely. On the screen, he watched the event unfold, and then he saw Dae-ho lean across a table and say something to Amanda that made her step back. She kept her expression professional, smiled the way service workers learn to smile when a customer crosses a line, protective, practiced, revealing nothing. Dae-ho reached out and touched her arm. Min-ho was standing before he knew he'd moved. Get the car, he said to Park Sung. The meeting with the Jeju contact isn't for another. Get the car. He arrived at Noir 40 minutes into the event. He didn't announce himself. He moved through the private entrance, past the kitchen, and into the dining room with the silence of a man who'd spent decades learning how to enter spaces like he'd always owned them. Dae-ho saw him first. Something complicated moved across his face, surprise, calculation, and then a slow, deliberate smile. "Brother," Dae-ho said, rising, "I didn't know you were joining us." "I wasn't planning to." Min-ho's gaze moved briefly across the room and found Amanda near the service station. She was watching him with carefully guarded eyes. "I am now." He took the seat at the head of the table that Dae-ho had occupied, and Dae-ho, after a breath-held pause, moved without argument. Later, when the event wound down and staff began clearing, Min-ho stood near the kitchen entrance as Amanda passed with an empty tray. "Did he bother you?" Min-ho asked quietly, no preamble. Amanda stopped. "I handle customers." "He's not a customer, he's my brother." The words carried weight, not an excuse but an explanation. "Did he bother you?" She looked at him for a long moment. "Nothing I couldn't manage." Min-ho nodded once, then, "If he comes here again without me, you have permission to refuse his table." "I don't think restaurant policy works." "I own 40% of this building," Min-ho said calmly. "Policy adjusts." Amanda stared at him. "That's either very helpful or very alarming." "Probably both." He held her gaze. "Good night, Amanda." He left before she could respond, and she stood in the corridor holding her tray, her heart doing something completely unprofessional against her ribs. She started noticing things. The black car that idled on the street outside Noir during her late shifts and was always gone by the time she stepped outside. The new lock on the break room door that Cho-hee said management had installed. The way the two men at the corner table, different faces each night, same quality of stillness, seemed to relax slightly whenever she left for her break and tensed again when she returned. She wasn't naive. Amanda had grown up watching her mother work 2 jobs and smile through discomfort and ask for nothing. She'd learned early that the world moved around powerful men like water around stone, and the women in their orbits either became part of the current or got crushed. She told herself she was maintaining professional distance. She told herself that every time Min-ho appeared at Noir 3 times that week, always alone, always requesting her section, she was simply doing her job well. She told herself this while rewinding a conversation they'd had about her degree, during which he'd asked what she wanted to do when she finished, and she'd said environmental law, and he'd gone quiet for a moment and then said, "That's the right kind of fight." Like he'd meant it. Like he understood fighting for things that mattered while the whole world tried to grind you down. She told herself she was maintaining distance. She was failing. The night everything changed began quietly. Amanda was finishing a closing shift when Cho-hee called her to the manager's office, her face ashen. "There's a problem," Cho-hee said. The problem was Dae-ho, seated in the office with 2 men behind him, wearing a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Miss Amanda," he said smoothly, "I wanted to speak with you privately." "About what?" she asked, keeping her voice level. "About my brother." Dae-ho tilted his head. "He's developed an interest in you, I think you've noticed." "I think this conversation is inappropriate," Amanda said, "and I'd like you to leave." "I'd like you to understand something." The smile faded. "Min-ho is the head of something much larger than a restaurant. The women who attract his attention tend to find themselves in complicated positions. I'm offering you a way out of that complication, a generous one." He set an envelope on the desk, thicker than the one Min-ho had sent. "Take a position at another restaurant, leave this one, it's a simple solution." Amanda looked at the envelope. Then she looked at Dae-ho. "No," she said. The silence that followed was the kind that precedes something dangerous. Dae-ho's eyes went cold. "You misunderstand your position." "No," Amanda said, her voice steady even as her pulse hammered. "I think you do." She picked up her bag from the desk where Cho-hee had left it. "I'm leaving now. If you follow me or contact me again, I will file a police report. I have your name and I'll use it." She walked out. Her hands didn't start shaking until she reached the alley behind the restaurant. She was pulling her phone out when headlights swept across the alley entrance and a car she recognized, black, silent, perpetually unhurried, pulled to a stop. Min-ho was out of the door before she could speak. He crossed the alley in 3 strides and stood in front of her, scanning her face, then the alley, then back to her with an intensity that felt like being held without being touched. "Are you hurt?" he demanded. "How did you?" She stopped. "The car, the men inside the restaurant, of course. You have people watching this place." "Are you hurt?" he repeated, and the repetition wasn't impatient, it was urgent, and that urgency undid something in her chest she'd had bolted shut for years. "I'm fine," she said. "Your brother tried to pay me to disappear." Something crossed Min-ho's face, not surprise, something older and darker than surprise. "Get in the car," he said quietly, "please." She hesitated. Every reasonable instinct said this was exactly the kind of situation she should walk away from. But the unreasonable thing living behind her ribs said something different, and she was so tired of being only reasonable. She got in the car. He didn't take her somewhere isolated or dramatic. He took her to a small, well-lit Korean barbecue restaurant 4 blocks away, owned by an elderly couple who greeted Min-ho with the warmth of long familiarity and asked no questions. They sat in a corner booth. He ordered without looking at the menu. The grill between them glowed orange. "My brother," Min-ho said, "believes my personal interests threaten his position." He turned a glass in his hand, not drinking. "He's been angling for control of the organization for 2 years. He watches everything I pay attention to." "So I became leverage," Amanda said. "You became a target," his jaw tightened. "Those are different things, and I take full responsibility for it." "You should," she said honestly. He looked at her. Yes. The honesty of it disarmed her. She'd expected deflection. Men like him, she'd assumed, were fluent in it. "What does he want?" she asked. "What he's always wanted, everything I built without having done the work." Min-ho set the glass down. "I've been managing him for years. I should have managed him better." "You can't control other people's greed." Something shifted in his expression. "No, but I can control what I expose the people I care about too." He paused, and the word care sat between them like something neither of them knew how to pick up safely. Amanda looked at the grill. "Min-ho." "I know," he said quietly. "I know what I am. I know what this is. I'm not asking you to be unafraid of it." "Then what are you asking?" He was quiet for a long moment. The restaurant sounds filled the space, laughter from another table, the sizzle of meat, the low warmth of ordinary life. "Let me keep you safe," he said finally, "that's all." Amanda looked at him across the grill, this man who ran an empire with silence and occupied space like weather, and whose eyes right now held something so unguarded it almost looked like begging. "Okay," she said softly. He moved her. Not forcibly, not with orders, but with logistics. He arranged a better apartment in a secure building, covered under a corporate account she could pretend was a housing stipend, and he didn't make her feel small about accepting it because he understood the difference between charity and protection. He also enrolled someone in her evening classes. Not himself, a woman named Jae-soo, who turned out to be Min-ho's most trusted intelligence operative, who sat 3 rows behind Amanda and was very good at looking like a mature student interested in environmental policy. Amanda discovered Jae-soo's actual role on a Tuesday when 2 men she'd never seen tried to follow her from the college campus to the subway, and Jae-soo materialized from nowhere, said 4 quiet words into her earpiece, and the men turned around and left. Amanda called Min-ho from the subway platform, shaking. He answered on the first ring. "I know," he said before she could speak. Jae-soo reported, "Are you okay?" "Who were they?" "Dae-ho's men, testing the perimeter." His voice was controlled, but she'd started to learn the difference between his controlled calm and his actual calm, and this was the former, tight at the edges, barely contained. "Min-ho, this is escalating." "I know." A pause. "I'm handling it." "When you say handling, I mean legally and organizationally." "Amanda." Another pause, softer. "I'm not asking you to be comfortable with what I am, but I am asking you to trust what I'm telling you." She pressed her back against the subway wall, people flowing past her, and closed her eyes. "I trust you," she said, and meant it, and that terrified her more than the men who'd followed her. She showed up at his office. She hadn't planned it. She'd finished her shift, turned toward the subway, and kept walking until she was standing in the lobby of Kang Group's legitimate headquarters, telling the front desk her name. She was shown up immediately, which told her he'd given standing instructions. Min-ho was at his desk when she entered, jacket off, sleeves rolled, looking more human than she'd ever seen him. He stood the moment she appeared, reading her face the way he always did, quickly, thoroughly. What happened? He asked. Nothing happened, she set her bag down. I needed to see you. She stopped, embarrassed. That sounds... Don't, he said quietly, coming around the desk. Don't explain it away. He stopped 2 feet from her, close enough that she could see the faint tiredness under his eyes, the tension in his shoulders from whatever the day had held. I'm frightened, she admitted. Not of your brother, not of the danger. She looked up at him. I'm frightened of this, of whatever this is, because I don't do this. I don't walk into men's offices because I needed to see them. Amanda. I don't fall for people I can't afford to fall for. Amanda? His voice was low, steady. He reached up slowly, giving her time to move away, and put his hand against her cheek. She didn't move. I know exactly what you're afraid of. You're afraid I'll consume everything you've built and leave damage behind. Yes, she whispered. I would rather burn down everything I own than be the thing that damages you. He said it simply, like it was obvious. I've been watching you for weeks, careful, brilliant, trying so hard to stay untouched by all of this, by me. His thumb moved slightly against her cheekbone. You don't have to be untouched by me. I'd rather you knew me, the real version. Show me then, she said, the real version. The space between them disappeared. Fade to black, emotion, warmth, closeness, the city lights beyond the glass, his hands gentle, her breath uneven, everything quiet and inevitable. She woke in his apartment, high floor, all glass, Seoul laid out below like a circuit board, and she was alone in the room, which told her he'd been careful with her, and being careful with someone was its own kind of language. She sat up. The old fear arrived immediately, right on schedule. This is where it ends. This is where he's satisfied and distant. This is where he remembers what he is and what you aren't. She dressed quickly, found her bag, moved toward the door. You're leaving. She spun. Min-ho was in the doorway to the hall, 2 cups of coffee in his hands, already dressed. He'd clearly been awake for hours. He looked at her bag, at her posture, and something quiet and sad moved through his expression. I do this, he said carefully, not making her feel accused. I know what you think happens next, that I'll close off or pretend it meant less than it did. He crossed the room and held out a cup. It meant everything. I need you to know that. She took the cup because her hands needed something to hold. You say that. I know. He sat on the edge of the bed, making himself smaller than usual, less imposing. I know words are insufficient. I'm asking for time to prove it. She sat beside him. Outside, Seoul moved through another morning, indifferent, enormous. I'm scared, she said again. I know, he said again. So am I. Dae-ho's gambit. The attack came 3 days later. Amanda was leaving her evening class when Jae-soo grabbed her arm at the campus entrance, and they moved fast, Jae-soo directing, earpiece active, into an unmarked car that took off before Amanda had her door closed. What's happening? Amanda demanded. Dae-ho moved. Jae-soo's voice was clipped. He's made a play for internal syndicate leadership using evidence that Min-ho has compromised the organization through a personal entanglement. Jae-soo glanced at her. You. Me. He's using your relationship as proof that Min-ho has become unreliable. Distributed information to 3 senior syndicate figures tonight claiming Min-ho is protecting a personal interest over organizational security. Jae-soo's jaw was tight. It's a coup, a slow one, but it's moving. Where is Min-ho? Managing it. Take me to him. That's not safe. Jae-soo, Amanda's voice was steady. Take me to him. The meeting was at a warehouse in the Port District, legitimate on paper, syndicate in practice, where 4 of the syndicate's senior figures sat across from Min-ho while Dae-ho stood at the far end of the table looking like a man who believed he'd already won. Amanda walked in through the side entrance with Jae-soo 3 steps behind her. Every head turned. Min-ho was on his feet immediately, crossing the room with his hand up, not to stop her but to reach her, and she stepped past his hand and kept walking to the center of the room. I understand, she said clearly to the room, to the 4 men watching her with calculating eyes, that I've been presented as a liability. Silence. I'm a waitress and a law student, she continued, with no criminal record and no organizational affiliation. I'm not a vulnerability, I'm not leverage, I'm a person. She looked at Dae-ho steadily. And whatever your brother told you about me being the reason Min-ho can't lead, he's wrong. The reason Min-ho is worth following is exactly because he's capable of choosing something real over something convenient. Dae-ho's expression twisted. This is exactly. She's right. The voice was deep, belonging to the eldest of the four senior figures, a man called Elder Wu, whose opinion in syndicate matters functioned like law. He was looking at Amanda with something that might, from the right angle, resemble respect. She walked into a room full of men who could end her career with a phone call, Elder Wu said, and she stood up straight. He turned to Dae-ho. A man who is led by his fears chooses safety over truth. A man worth following chooses differently. He leaned back. Kang Min-ho has my confidence. 3 of the other 4 nodded. Dae-ho's face went white. They sat in Min-ho's car outside the warehouse afterward, the city enormous around them, and Min-ho looked at Amanda for a long time. You walked in there, he said. Yes. You didn't have to do that. No, she agreed, I wanted to. He exhaled slowly, like something that had been locked in his chest for a long time was releasing. Dae-ho will be removed from the organization. Tonight, he'll be given resources to build something separate far from here. I won't leave him with nothing, but he cannot stay. Is that hard, she asked. Yes, simple, honest, he's my brother. She reached across and put her hand over his, and he turned his palm up and held on. You chose me, she said softly. I chose you, he confirmed. I'll keep choosing you as many times as it costs for as long as you'll have me. The dust settled the way heavy things settle slowly, leaving a changed landscape. Dae-ho relocated to Jeju with a severance arrangement and the understanding that some fractures once made are permanent. Min-ho didn't pretend it hadn't happened. He didn't perform equanimity. He grieved it quietly, privately, the way men like him process grief in motion, in work, and eventually in the presence of someone who didn't require him to be made of stone. Amanda finished her semester with grades she was proud of. She stayed at Noir not because she needed to, but because she was good at it and she liked Cho-hee, and she wasn't interested in being packaged into Min-ho's world so completely that she lost the shape of herself. He respected this. He showed up for her shift meals when she worked late. He learned which professors in her program were brilliant and which were mediocre. He listened when she was frustrated and didn't offer solutions when what she needed was to be heard. He learned her. She learned him too, the version without the armor, which was quieter and more careful, and occasionally, when he thought she wasn't watching, tender in ways that made her breath catch. She was in her apartment on a Sunday morning, legal readings spread across the kitchen table, when she heard the knock. She opened the door. Min-ho stood in the hallway in a plain gray sweater and dark pants, no bodyguards he'd taken to trusting the building's security on quiet days, holding a small box and looking, for the first time since she'd known him, genuinely nervous. I prepared a speech, he said. Did you? It was very good. I've been revising it for 2 weeks. He glanced down at the box. I've forgotten all of it. Amanda leaned against the doorframe. I know what I am, he said, the same words he'd used before but different now, fuller. I know the world I come from, I know the work ahead, the legitimate transition I'm building, the legal channels, the accountabilities I haven't outrun yet. He looked at her directly. I'm not offering you easy, I'm offering you real, completely, irreversibly real. He opened the box. The ring inside was simple, a single warm-toned stone in a clean setting, nothing ostentatious, which told her he'd thought about what she would actually want rather than what would impress. Amanda, his voice was steady now, back to itself. You walked into a room full of men and stood up for me when you didn't have to. You throw away my cards and eat my food and look at me like I'm ordinary, which is the most extraordinary thing anyone has ever done for me. He exhaled. Marry me, build something with me, let me spend the rest of my life being worthy of you. She looked at the ring. She looked at him. You forgot your speech, she said. Completely. It was better this way, she told him and reached for his hand, and the smile that broke across Kang Min-ho's face was the kind that men like him were never supposed to have, unguarded and enormous and entirely real. Yes, she said, obviously yes. The wedding was small intentionally at Amanda's insistence. A private ceremony with Jisoo as witness, Elder Wu as the senior guest who'd insisted on attending, Cho-hee weeping quietly in the second row, and Amanda's sister Nadia who shook Min-ho's hand and told him she'd heard about the warehouse incident and that he'd better never give Amanda a reason to regret walking through a door for him. She won't, Min-ho said, and Nadia believed him. Sunlight through the glass, Seoul quiet for once. Amanda sat at the kitchen table with her coffee and a legal brief, and one hand rested against her middle. Still early, still their secret, still the most tender thing she'd ever carried. Min-ho came in from his morning calls, stopped in the kitchen doorway and watched her the way he always did, like she was the thing in the room that made sense of everything else. She looked up, found him watching, didn't look away. "Come sit down," she said. He crossed the kitchen, sat beside her, put his arm around her shoulder and pulled her close. His hand moved to cover hers, both of them now resting against the quiet, impossible future growing beneath. Outside, the city moved. Vast and indifferent and utterly unaware that inside one glass-walled apartment, the most feared man in 3 countries was sitting in a gray sweater at a kitchen table with his wife and the first real thing he'd ever allowed himself to keep. And he was, at last, completely undone by peace. Amanda leaned her head against his shoulder. Min-ho pressed his lips to her hair. The city carried on. And love, stubborn, borderless, catastrophically inconvenient, had, as it always does, won.